Welcome, everyone. My name's Joe Roll, and we're really happy to have you here this year. Last year we did this virtually, so it was a little different just watching Ryan talking to the camera last year, so it's great to have everybody here in person and participating here. So this meeting is a little different. This is not the usual annual meeting. Tonight we're going to definitely review the status of the club and where we are, but we're also going to introduce the downstairs renovation that we'd like to proceed with. So it's a little bit unique this year. Last year was definitely a turbulent year with COVID and everything, but we've really battled through, and we're at this point now where seems stable here at our little bubble here at Indian Valley. But we're looking forward to focusing on the future. We've really made some changes, some additions, I should say. So the future is, as a board, we're very excited about the future direction of where we are going. So we have a great golf course, as everyone knows when they're out there playing. Actually, talking to people who've gone to other courses are saying that our golf course is actually playing better than some of the golf courses that they played at. So that's awesome. The ballroom, the renovation has been great. As you can tell by the usage, our usage has been increased over the past number of years, and you're going to see some of that data come up. And it's awesome. So thank you for making this a place where you want, a destination where you want to come and eat and participate and enjoy yourself. So as a board, we're not really as a board and the management team, we're not really resting on our laurels. We're really excited about the year, and we're excited to have you here so you can hear about how good the club is doing, and also the renovation project that we're proposing for downstairs in the golfer's patio. We'd like to take a moment to remember those we lost in the last year, including Lee Hopkins, Betty Hopkins, Gary Rossman, Dan Filippo, Dick Williams, and Lexi Price. Thank you. So here's the agenda we have for tonight. First thing we'd like to do is a reading of the minutes for last meeting.
I make a motion we waive the reading of the minutes.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. So, moving on, we'll introduce the board and the management team. I'm going to talk about the golfer's patio and the lower locker room renovation. I'm just going to give a 30,000-foot view of that as far as the board's vision of that, and Eric's going to go into more detail of that project. And in his Eric's update, we'll talk about the club in general and the membership update. And lastly, Jim gets to share the good news of how we are doing financially and how the club is. And we'd like to keep all the questions to the end, if you would. So, the board, I'd like to thank the board. The board gives their time to help make this club, our club, the best club it is, and they are dedicated to doing the things necessary to help improve it, make it what it is. So thank you guys, appreciate the support from you all. All right, the golfer's patio and lower locker room. So looking back, Vision 2020, I was over there sitting and listening to Chambers talk about, oh, you build it, they will come. Who thought skeptically of that if you do it? I'm right there with you. I thought, yeah, right. Yeah, that's their sales pitch. But the proof is in the pudding. There's a strong evidence that renovated dining facilities and outdoor dining facility venues can generate significant revenues. And look at what we've done. Bistro 52. So we used the last full year, 2018, 2019 to the 2021. So 632 to almost $1 million that the food and beverage has grown just upstairs. Also the sand trap, 61,000 in 2017 up to 141. So if you add and renovate and keep improving usage will happen. And that's a big foundation for as the board looks at this new project. And the golfers patio will give us another area for outdoor dining. It's also going to allow for the banquet business to flourish. It will be an attraction. And when you see the slides Jim's going to present, our banquet business has suffered with the COVID, and having this additional venue can help to increase. And that means that additional banquet revenue will help us all in the sense of greater revenue to the club. Included in this will be a renovation of the men's locker room and improved halfway house for all members. And you look at downstairs and you look at the job that the club has, and we want to look at improving, getting it upgrading to the standard that we've established upstairs, and that's what we'll do. We have some renderings that you'll see, and you'll see the vision of what that will look like. So we want to make it better for everyone. So the women golfers, they don't have to stop in their locker room. They can come around. They can use the newly renovated restrooms that will be downstairs with easily accessible. So it's going to make it a better experience for everyone. And there won't be any membership assessment. So that's the good news. Yes. So Jim is going to explain to us why and how that's all possible. But right now, I would like to pass it on to Eric Beck for his report. So thank you very much. Thank you for attending.
Thank you very much. I also want to thank the board. This has been such a challenging year, and so many interactions, so many decisions needing to be made, and the guidance, the support from all of you through the last year and a half especially has just been enormous and done so much for myself and the other employees here, so thank you. So I guess the biggest thing of the last year, as it was for everybody in this country, was COVID. Huge impact on our business, on our country club, on members' experiences. Last year we had a seemingly endless amount of mandates, restrictions, changing, coming and going, and navigating those were very challenging. What the board's goal was during this time was to follow the mandates and restrictions, not break the law, but do so, but maintain as much normalcy and as much member services and experience as we could within those constraints. And I think that having that kind of clear direction when making decisions that kept on coming really helped, and it was amazing. I mean, the business boomed here at the club. This was the comfortable place that people could come, spend their time, be outside often, and I think it really kind of worked out, having a consistent message of safety, but having offerings also. Thank you to the membership for, during this time, being so patient and understanding, and so supportive. I mean, again, we were rounds of golf last year. We're up 30% from the year before. The dining was booming. I mean, people were coming here and feeling good about it. And that support is really, so many businesses struggled so much, and we flourished, which is really amazing, and a tribute to you all. Also, again, want to thank the board during this time and all these difficult decisions. Always at the forefront of their decision making was the employees, not just the safety, but also supporting them through the tough times and the challenges that were coming around. Good example of this, in December, we had 3 weeks of food and beverage closure, and the board and on behalf of the membership supported those food and beverage employees that were impacted by that 3-week shutdown by carrying their wages through that time in full, which was just amazing, through the holidays, through Christmas, a really important time for them. So just awesome. I mean, we always talk about Indian Valley Country Club being a family, and these are just some examples of how, and all these things really create that environment here, which is just so awesome. So as we moved into 2021, the restrictions continued. It's hard to believe that 4 months ago, no one was allowed to sit at the bar and everyone was wearing masks still. It seems a lot longer than that to me at least. And business has been booming. Rounds of golf this year are up over 10% from last year, which is just incredible. Dining is over 80% higher than it was 2 years ago from the time that we opened. It's just been incredible, and we've had this through the challenges of supply shortages, price increases, labor shortages, which don't just impact us. Obviously, the whole country is being impacted by that, but it really created some challenges here at the club, which we've had to fight through. We made some decisions to help offset that. We closed on Tuesday evenings. Kind of felt that was one of the least member impactful ways to ease some of the pressure off of the food and beverage staff especially. As you know, we reduced the menu down to a very limited lunch and dinner menu for about a month and a half, almost 2 months. The pool opened very slowly from a food standpoint, and thank you for your patience through that. But we've been hit hard, as many businesses have again, but we certainly have, and some of these small decisions have helped make us through at least as well as we did. So, we also lost a lot of some very important employees here. We lost a sense of stability in our team, which we've always fought very strong for. We like stability. We also like improvement. We also like keeping our foot on the gas pedal. But it has just been a tumultuous year, and through it all, it's through all the challenges. I'm most proud of my team and all of the managers and employees for weathering that storm and, to be honest, staying open through it. It's been some really significant challenges, but we're ready for whatever's next, and we're looking forward to that. So our goal is to always make things better, and that goes for right now as much as any other day in our time here. We want to make things better. So whether you're happy right now, whether you're not happy right now, we will improve upon right now. That's always our goal, and that's what we're going to keep doing. So all this leads to membership. Our membership, we've been extremely successful, especially the last year and a half between COVID, which has driven people to outdoor sports and outdoor dining, and kept them around home, which has certainly been good, but so have the renovations that we've done and the money that we've put into the club. So definitely the clubhouse has something to do with this. The pool experience we created a couple years ago, the golf course and the conditions out there, what Mike's able to do with the investments that we've made. So the green is the primary accounts, blue is limited, red is social, and then black is other. If you look, each one of those 4 categories, well, 3 categories anyway, is higher than it's been at any point in the last 7 years. So we capped the membership at 265. We reduced it to that when we saw the number of rounds that people were playing last year and how active people were. We just recently raised it to 270, as we're seeing a little bit more time on the tee sheets, a little bit more, people I think are traveling more and involved in other activities. So really good to see. This graph shows new members, so how many members joined this year. So we have a very active membership committee. We have a great new member process right now, which is awesome, with the new member orientation, other steps in the process to help people integrate and stay once they are members. But this year, in the 12 months from August through July, we saw 86 new members join, far exceeding even some really impressive years prior. Want to note, so we have 15 new primaries. Well, as soon as January 1st hit, we weren't able to take in any new primaries, so they joined as social and then have since upgraded. So we've had 18 socials upgrade to primary memberships and 9 upgrade to limiteds. So really amazing on that front and the popularity, and again, I think it directly has to do with the money that we've invested in the club and the good things. So another project, Jed Bartlett said, what's next? Well, this is next. So few main goals with the project downstairs. So one is kind of the outside area. So outside, we're proposing building a roof out there, so it's about 1,600 square feet, and putting a bar, an outdoor bar, extending the patio out some. So this will give us, not just for golfers or any member coming down, a real, gathering spot and experience out there. It also allows us a lot more flexibility to use for golf events, for banquets, for weddings. Just really a outstanding space down there that's attractive for a lot of different reasons. So outside's one area. The halfway house experience is another high priority. So creating an experience for men and women, for all golfers, to come around on the turn before the 10th hole and get something easily, use the restrooms and get something to eat or drink in the same place. Have an experience that's really in the same level of most other clubs, which we've had as a deficiency because of our layout. And then to do some work inside. So inside, redo the bar, a cosmetic upgrade, carpet, walls, ceiling, lighting, redo the restrooms in there. So both restrooms would be redone. Tables and chairs, expanding the cigar room by about 50%. That room's used quite a bit, especially in the off season. And also addressing some infrastructure issues. So we'll be redoing all of the wiring down there, bringing it up to code, redoing the plumbing. We found out last week with Ida, flooding problems aren't done down there. It's been a couple of years since we've seen it, but we'll be addressing that. We're also looking at a modest upgrade of the men's locker room. So carpet, paint, same layout, but just kind of sprucing it up a little bit to match the rest of the clubhouse. Neat thing is this will complete the member areas of the clubhouse. So here's the floor plan that we're working on. So we are still planning. We're looking for feedback, and we have exit surveys that we'd love for you to fill out. We are moving quickly through the planning process, but we are still in the decision-making phase. So we want your feedback. But this is what where we've come to so far. A couple things I want to point out. So outside, you see the bar that's built in. It has about 10, 12 seats. The dotted line here is the covered area. So it's about 1,600 square feet. Comes out of here about 35 feet, and it's about 45 feet wide. So fans in there, heaters to extend the season. We've added this door right here, which will access the turn at times, as well as the men's and ladies' room directly from outside. So I say turn at times because what we really think members will do when they pull in here after the 9th hole is they'll walk right up to the bar, right? They'll walk right up to the bar, order drinks, order food. So we have a pass-through window here so that the two bars can communicate, so that someone working in the turn area, the halfway house area, has a way to access that outside bar. But then at times, maybe when this is closed, for golf outings, for different events, we also have a window here that's directly into the turn where food will be offered and beverage. The restrooms, the layout has changed in order to get everything that we want in there and have them ADA compliant. Excuse me. The bar inside is redone, and again, this is a back of the house area. So this is a wall here. Seating is about the same inside as it is now. It might be a little bit shy of it. This wall right here is moving out about 18 to 24 inches into the room. The really neat thing about this is between the seating in here, which is I think about 72 maybe with the bar, 60 or so without. You also have the outside seating as usable space. So during a golf event, if there's a rain delay or after a golf event, that seating becomes much more attractive than out there in the sun on a sunny day. So having the fans going and having it covered really creates over 120 seats between the two. As I said, we're deep in the planning process, right? So the versions are changing. This, I think, shows a good overview, zoomed out. The details in here have changed since this version. But you can see the roof line, so it extends out there and almost to the building here. The patio will be extended out. In this, the lines right here, but we're looking at making some kind of architectural design to really make it kind of a desirable, soft, feeling, usable space. We're designing in a couple built-in fire pits, soft seating. The seating that we're going to have out there is similar or identical to the seating that we have right now. So we'll be kind of adding to what we have and being able to work around that. So this is a rendering of what we're looking at. Want to note the furniture isn't exactly right. There might be some cars in the parking lot, I would think, on a beautiful day like this. But it gives you an idea of how much of the area is covered. The fans and heaters in there, the bar being right in there, and just how vibrant of a space that can be, not only for golfers, but for people to come get a drink before going out for dinner or spending an afternoon. You can see the door in the corner, which leads into the restrooms, and the pass-through service window that I mentioned for the bartenders to work between. This one's much less exciting, but this would be a picture of the inside bar, kind of give you an idea of the size. Again, it's about 10 or 12 seats at the bar. So decided to keep it straight. I mean, the culture here is of basically a service bar. Give people the opportunity to sit at it and see what happens with that, but the culture is definitely at the tables with your golf group. These are some ideas from the restrooms. You can see the layouts on the top, but also I think most important is that the style, kind of the finish level that we went for up here is what we'll be continuing down there. So this is a kind of overview of the costs that we're looking at. So we had an outstanding experience with Minninger, who was the general contractor for the project up here, during some really tough times, including COVID kicking in and rules and shutdowns. They were extremely fair to us, not just with that, but in all of their workings with us. So we've leaned on them as a cost consultant as we're going through the planning, kind of see where we're at and work through the plans with them. So they've been a real partner with us through this planning process. The hard construction cost is actually the construction numbers. So what Minninger does, what the electricians, plumbers, the mechanical, all of the work that's done, hard construction. Right now we're at about $953,000. We have healthy contingencies in there. One, we certainly learned up here the benefit of having strong contingencies in there because you never know what you're going to find in an old building. These are new, the construction numbers are new, so product inflation has been reflected in there. We had a third contingency for that, which worked out, and we were glad we had. But the first contingency is for this planning phase for changes that we want to make. Construction contingency is for things that we find once we're in there. Soft costs are consultants, planning fees, permitting, different expenses like that. And then there's AV, furniture, for $135,000. So what we're looking at is about a $1.4 million project. Same quality that what we heard so much last time was, you did it right. Thank you. It looks good. It's done well, and that's our intention downstairs. In terms of timing, we do, so the size of the capital project does need to be approved by the membership. So just like it did last time, except there's not an assessment that would also need to be approved. So we need 50% of those that vote to vote in support of the project, and we're looking to move towards that. And we want to gather feedback from these meetings, and we'll send this out through this meeting out through email. Get some feedback and get the vote out pretty quickly so that we can get it back in the beginning of October. So assuming that, and assuming everything goes well with the rest of the planning, we're looking at a January start and about a 4-month project timeline. Now to the fun stuff.
How are we ever going to pay for all this? That's the question. So good evening, everybody. As Eric and Joe said, we're going to go through a couple of different things. One is we're going to talk about how the club did in this year that just ended. For some of you who may be new members, our membership year goes from July 1st to June 30th. So it's not a calendar year, but it's July 1 to June 30, and that follows kind of our golfing years and membership year. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the year that just ended in June 30th. I'm also going to give you an update on what the budget for next year looks like. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about the project and how we're going to pay for the costs that are just laid out. So starting with the last year that just finished up. It was a banner year, as Eric has mentioned. It was really our strongest year that we've had ever, driven by higher membership numbers. And I can't stress enough how important having full membership is. And we're going to see the benefit of that full membership, not only in the numbers that we have for 2021, but already into 2021-22, the year that's just now beginning. Despite the fact that we had this great year, the banquet business is still lagging behind. So we've been very successful. I'm sure people have seen the weddings that have been here. That's wonderful. We haven't had weddings in this old facility for a lot of years, not more than, let's say, 1 or 2 a year. We're doing very well in getting some of those big events back. What's not coming back right now are the small corporate events. People aren't having their business lunches, and we'll see what happens with the holiday party and things like that. But we had this good result, even though when we look at, and we'll talk about 2018-19 quite a bit. That's because that's the year before the renovations were done. It also is the year before COVID hit, so it's probably a better comparator sometimes to see the progress that we're making. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But we're down, the banquet business is down 58% from where it was before we did the renovation and before COVID. So I know, I look at that as a huge opportunity for us in the future because we've got a great facility here. For those who have heard me before, you know that I'm going to talk about the income statement and then I'm going to talk about cash flow. At the end of the day, what all of us should be concerned about is cash flow. So the accounting rules require that you have to expense things that necessarily aren't cash. We do what we have to do because we want to have our books in good order. But really at the end of the day, it comes down to how's the club doing financially from a cash point of view. So that's been a stress for the last 5 years since I've been involved in this, and so I'll take you through some of that as well today. So let's start with the year that just ended. And I know there's a lot of numbers on the page, so I'm going to try to walk you through it. And the first thing I want to do is I want to highlight 2020, 2021. It says pro forma, not actual. And so some people may say, well, what does that even mean? So what happened was that as we put all of the assets for Vision 2020 into service, the building, even the improvements to the golf course and things like that, we worked with our accountant and we looked at what our asset ledger was looking like. And there were some assets that were replaced because of Vision 2020 that weren't fully depreciated. So we took the opportunity at the end of last year, the fiscal year, which is December 31st, we wrote some of those assets off. All that means is that there was an asset that was there that was being depreciated. We paid for them a long time ago, but in order to clean up the books, the entry that you make is to reduce the asset, and the other side of that entry has to go to depreciation expense. So there's about $300,000 of depreciation expense that if you were to look at our actual final financial statements, we wouldn't have $261,000, we'd have a small loss. But it really is a one-time event, and so we felt that it was appropriate, we talked through this at the finance committee meeting as well, that we wanted to show you the results without that so that it's a little bit less confusing. So then I want to draw your attention to a couple of other things. When I look down here at the bottom, we made $261,000, and that sounds pretty good, but it compares to $1.3 million that we made the year before. Well, I'll point out that within that $1.3 million is about $1.5 million of the Vision 2020 assessments. So when we paid our upfront assessments, all that has to be recognized from an accounting point of view over the period that we're building the assets. And so it really, about $1.2 million of that was the upfront. There's a couple $100,000 in the ongoing $45 a month. So the reality is that $261,000 number is significantly higher than what we typically do. We generally have been, for the time that I've been here, plus or minus $40,000 to $50,000 around break even. We're either at break even or we're slightly better. So it is a significantly better outcome than what we normally would have. I'd also point out that in this last year, we had $442,000 in other income. So our gross club income is the dues that we pay, any of the assessments that we pay, and then other. And those others are things like, it involves the initiation fees, but it also takes into account greens fees and outings fees and some other miscellaneous income. We had about $182,000 in initiation fees. Again, that's cash that comes into the club, and so we recognize that this year. It's going to normalize at some level like that going forward. Finally, the last one I forgot to circle is the golf course. I think we're all very happy with the shape of the golf course. In the last year, we basically moved from spending about $900,000 a year to somewhere between $1.1 and $1.2 million on the golf course. Last year, a lot of that was because we did the sunlight enhancement project, so we pulled out a lot of trees. We rebuilt some of the fairways, all the work that Mike talked about all winter long that we're seeing the benefits on. So that was, I could have called that an unusual expense, but the reality is that we've made the decision going forward that we're going to maintain Mike's budget at that level or higher because we think that that's a number that really helps us to keep this golf course in the best shape possible. So now we had $260,000 in net income. Let's look at what the cash flow looks like. So we start with that same $261,000 in net income, and what the cash statement of cash flow does is it adjusts all those accounting issues so that you really see what happened to the cash. And so by looking at the bottom, we start with, here's the cash from the end of 2020. We had $1,076,000 in cash, June 30th of 2020. June 30th of this year, we have $1,010,000. So our cash went down by $66,000. But I'll say a couple of things. Let's not forget about the fact that we have $1 million in cash, right? So we try to keep a pretty significant amount of reserves. That number has fluctuated in the time that I've been involved with the finance from anywhere from, let's say, 1.3, 1.4 million down to $600,000 or $700,000 as we have special projects. We did the dredging. We used the reserves for that type of thing. But in that $66,000 of cash flow that went out the door, I also want to point out that, so we start with our net income, we add back depreciation, because depreciation is that book expense, it doesn't cost us any cash, the cash was already paid before. And then what I've circled here is we spent just under $200,000 on the non-Vision 2020 capital. So we have been running about $200,000, $250,000 a year in capital. During the Vision 2020 year, you can see that almost the normal capital went down to $84,000 because we were doing so much additional work to the clubhouse, we didn't feel that we needed to spend it. But we brought that back to $200,000 this year. We also paid off $335,000 of bills that were left over from June 30th of 2020 related to Vision 2020. So we put out that amount of money. We paid $178,000 for the greens drainage project that went out there. And at the end of June last year, as COVID was just starting, we were a little nervous and we said, you know what, let's take a couple $100,000 off of our line of credit just in case we need a little extra cash. It turned out we never used the cash that was from that, but we had to repay that this year. So when you look at it, you've got just about $900,000 of expenses that we paid, and yet we were still able to just have our cash go down by $66,000. So what I'm here to tell you is that the vision that we had with Vision 2020 was we need to improve the quality of the product that we have so that we get membership at higher levels and people using the club. And if you do that, then you really have a financially successful business and one that will allow us to reinvest into the club. And I truly believe that's where we are today. So looking again at some of those areas, the pre-COVID years, we've talked a little bit about some of these, but club gross income, those dues, assessments, and all those other things, up $740,000. Remember, in this 2018-2019 actual, we didn't have any Vision 2020 assessments. In this number of $3 million, we have about $170,000 that represents the $45 a month that people pay if you didn't pay the whole amount up front. Member food and beverages, again, over this 2-year period, we're at 57%, despite the fact that the banquet revenue is down 58%, which means net our food and beverage is still up 12% over that period. So I think it's a really good outcome. And again, same way with net income, we're significantly higher than where we were prior to the renovation. So now I'm going to switch to the budget for this year. So where are we at this year? What have we assumed? And I'm going to talk about a little bit about some of the key drivers of the budget, but it also goes to, when the finance committee meets, we try to get an accurate budget, one that we think we have a good chance at achieving. But you also always want to look at it and say, well, what if things don't go quite right? Do we have a lever that we can pull back on if the revenues aren't quite as high and things like that? So those are a lot of things that we work through. So club income is driven by what I'll call the full year effect of higher membership and the runoff of the discounts for the progressive membership. So let me just move you to the P&L real quick here. So what I'm talking about is that club income is up 10% in 21 over, in 22 over 21. But if you remember, the dues change that we had this year, which is what's reflected in our budget for this year, were less than $200 on the average membership. So that was only about a 1.5%, between 1 and 2% increase in our dues. So why is the whole number going up 10%? Well, the reason is two things. Number one, last year we saw all these members who were starting to come in, they only paid their dues for part of the year. They weren't all here on July 1st. So you had the impact of those people being here for a full year of paying their dues in the Vision 2020 monthly assessment. You remember when members were joining before Vision 2020, we were doing everything that we could to bring in new members. So we offered what was called a progressive membership. And if you remember, the people who came in the first year, they paid 50% of the full dues. The second year, they paid 75% of the full dues. And the third year, they now have no discounts and they're into the fold. So we're still seeing a significant number of people who join in 2019 and 2020 that have some level of discount, but once we move out another year or two, and we haven't offered that discount, that will go away. So that helps to increase the club income as well. Club expenses, so that's the sum total of the golf course and the clubhouse, the golf shop, sorry, not the golf shop, the administrative, and the pool. We're basically increasing our cost base just under 3%. When we look at food and beverage sales, so this is the revenue. What you can see is that it's up about 18%. But the reality is, I'm going to just try to go backwards a couple of slides. So this shows you what our total revenues were from 2016 through the budget 2022. You can see that in 2020 we really made a big leap. A lot of that was because of the one-time upfront assessments. But now we're on a different trajectory, and we are expecting that our total revenues will continue to increase this year. Again, despite the fact that this is what our banquet revenues look like. So this really, I think, demonstrates what we were talking about, how the banquet business fell off and it hasn't come back. We are expecting a pretty significant increase in that, but I'll also show you on the P&L that, so while we have significantly higher revenues for food and beverage, $337,000, our total profits are actually about the same as they are this year. And that's because we have assumed that we're going to have significantly higher costs of our labor. It also, to me, is a little bit of a hedge. If we don't see the revenues come back, the beautiful thing about banquet business is we don't have people just sitting around hoping that there's a banquet. We bring them in when we have a banquet. So there's a natural hedge between those two, that if the revenues don't come, we can back off some of the expense. So now we go to the cash flow for this year. So our expectation is that we have $330,000 income from operations. We are assuming that you all, the members, approve the project that we're talking about. But we still have $276,000 of our normal ongoing capital. So regardless of the project, that's you know, a lot of that is the equipment for the golf course, but it's also any other area. We go through a process every year of asking everyone where they need to spend some capital. We put it together. Long-term capital plan committee this year has done a really nice job of prioritizing it. So we'll expect to spend about $276,000 in capital this year. And then the next is the payment of the golfer's patio and lower locker room renovation. The total cost of the project is $1,398,000. We've worked with Univest, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the valuations that we have, but we're confident that we'll be able to borrow about just over $1 million. So the difference between the $1.4 million project price and the $1,035,000 is what we're going to put into the project, $365,000. And then we have the depreciation add back, and the last two things are the amount of the principal payments that we make on our loans, because we only have interest expense in the P&L, so you have to put the principal interest here. And as a result, we expect that we would have about $237,000 in what's called free cash flow. And we talked a lot about that at the board. We know that we have other projects that we need to do. We are amortizing our debt over 25 years for the Vision 2020. We're going to use 10 years for this new loan. So we want to have the ability to either have cash to pay down debt if necessary, but there's other projects as well. I think there's probably no one in this room who would say to me, I love our cart paths. Right? So we know we've done a fair amount of work. Mike and his team have looked at a range of options. I think one of the things that we're looking at is, so how's the drainage going to hold up in a really wet year? I think we've had a pretty wet year, right, Mike?
Yeah.
So cart paths are high on our list, and so what I would say is that the expectation is that we would bank that money once we develop a plan for what we're going to do with the cart path. I'm confident we'll be able to fund that in the future. So budget ways, we're really in great financial shape right now. I believe that this budget is built on a reasonable basis. I can imagine if, let's see how things happen with COVID, but I could see our banquet business doing better than what we've we've budgeted here if the world returns to some level of sanity. And as I said, we'll set that excess cash flow aside for additional projects as we go forward. Last bit, now let's talk about the renovation plan, okay? So the finance committee, working with the management team, we've put together projections that go out several years. I'm gonna show you this year's budget plus the following year. So the budget is what's in the plan for 21-22. And in 22-23, what we've said is that we're gonna assume that our golfing memberships remain full and that there's a little bit of churn. So, you know, we have people who leave, and when they leave, we ask somebody who's on the waiting list to step up. They, you know, then pay us an initiation fee, and so there's a little bit of churn on that, but it's not very, very significant. We think by that time we have a chance that we would have social membership at 250, which we're right now proposing as a cap. We are looking at a modest dues increase, and you know, I recognize that when you see these numbers and say how good they are, why do we need any dues increase? But history will tell you if you go through a period where you do no dues increase, all of a sudden you get yourself into a hole. So at least our philosophy, my philosophy, and the board's philosophy has been, let's have a modest increase so that we stay ahead of inflation. That's what we've assumed in here. That's not a final decision, but that's, you know, what our expectation is. And the growth in the food and beverage revenue and the profits really comes from the rebound in the banquet business. But it also, looking at it in our budget for this year, we're assuming that we're gonna miss 4 months worth of revenues from the downstairs grill because we're gonna be closed January to April. So, you know, while the overall revenues in food and beverage in 23 increase by 20% over the current year's budget, the reality is most of that is just recouping the revenues that we lose because we're closed this year. Other than that, we put in a 3% increase. And again, we thought about it, we looked at it and said, you know, history says 15 to 20% increase is probably what you could expect. We're trying to be a little bit more conservative here on that. So what does it mean if I look at the 2 years? You know, I'm not going to go through every number on this. There's similar types of things that we've talked about, but our net income, $336,000 this year, $583,000 the following year. If we go to the cash flow, this is where, to me, things get really exciting. I already talked about the fact that 21-22, we think we can put aside $237,000. But when we look at 22-23, you know, $200,000 for our ongoing capital and the principal payments that we have to make on those loans, and we have the ability to have, you know, $1 million incremental cash over the $1 million that we have today. So in terms of talking about how are we ever going to be able to do things like cart paths, how are we going to be able to, you know, tackle on some of those other big expenses that are potentially out there. You know, the list is a lot longer than the amount of cash that we have. I think that what we've done is that we've put ourselves into a really good position to have a very viable, strong club as we move into the future. So the funding of the project will come from cash from our reserves, and you know, realistically what we're looking at is saying we had $200,000 in initiation fees. We'd like to use that plus some of our own cash. We have done a new valuation of the property, and it's very interesting to me because even just from, you know, the 4 years ago when we did it the last time pre-Vision 2020, the property values have gone up. The bank's willingness to loan against the total amount of property has come down because they're being a little bit more conservative, but we're very comfortable that we will be able to borrow about $1 million from Univest. So that's where most of it comes, and then the balance will be from the amount that we have already received plus the amount we expect to receive in initiation fees. I think there's a logic to saying you only get an initiation fee once, so let's put that into an ongoing capital asset. And then a little bit of money from our cash reserves. What does that do to our debt? You know, we've as a club, we've had anywhere from, I think the high point that I saw was somewhere around $4.3 million of debt. Will be higher. We're going to end up with just about $5 million in debt after this project. The current mortgage, because it's 25-year amortization, costs us in principal and interest per year $264,000. The new debt, we're assuming that we're gonna pay that off of over 10 years, just so that we don't have both of them at the same long extended period. And that's gonna cost us about $125,000 of incremental cash on an annual basis. That's what the principal and interest costs are. But I also wanted to put on here that the carrying cost of our debt, even though it was a much smaller number pre-Vision 2020 because it was higher interest rate, we're actually only about $50,000 higher carrying cost after both of these projects than we were before we did the remortgage for Vision 2020. And you know, $389,000. I'm not suggesting that's not a lot of money. It is a lot of money to pay for principal and interest every year. But when I look at it in comparison to some of our other expense bases that we have, it's very reasonable, and I think it's something that's very achievable for the club to take care of. So where are we at? You know, it's a proposed $1.4 million project. We take on an extra $1 million of debt, puts us at a debt level of $5 million with the increased costs that I talked about. We believe the assumptions around the increased food and beverage revenues are reasonable, and there's probably a good opportunity to exceed those. We did develop both an upside and a downside case to the projections that I just talked about, and the downside case assumed that the economy turns around very quickly. And instead of us being at full membership, we're back to kind of the membership levels that we were at before we saw the expansion for this last couple of years. And we also assume that food and beverage reduces as well. And you know, the committee was very satisfied that even with those lower projections, the project still makes complete sense to go forward with. And finally, as I said, you know, we're going to do this with the cash that we have and the debt capacity we have. So this doesn't cost any of us. We're not going to come back and say we need, you know, an assessment in order to pay for this. So that's the financial projections on the plan. And I think at this point, we're going to open up the floor for question and answer. Thank you very much for your attention.